Hello, people. Thanks for joining our webinar tonight. I'm Claire Malcolmson. I'm the Executive Director of the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition. Just going to do a little bit of chatting and welcoming in the opening minutes as people come in to the meeting. So first of all, thanks again for joining us. We've got Tim Gray from Environmental Defense and Margaret Profit, who are going to be joining me making presentations tonight. And they're up on the screen now, you can see them. And Jennifer Van Gennep is our communications consultant, and she's behind the screen. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition while we're getting things warmed up. We are a charity. We're a lake-wide environmental organization, and we have 26 groups in the Lake Simcoe watershed, mostly local environmental groups and cottager groups and ratepayer associations from all over the Lake Simcoe watershed. So I expect we have some members of those groups here tonight. Thank you for joining us. We have been, the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition has been around since 2003. We were created really to have an independent charity looking at the health of the watershed. One of those early board members, Bob Eisenberg, joined the Board of Environmental Defense in Ontario Nature and created a campaign Lake Simcoe, which resulted in getting the Lake Simcoe Protection Act in 2008. And so it's 2009, the plan came into place. We're basically 10 years later, and the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition has come back with myself as its first ED to make sure that we can really help shepherd the legislation that many of our member groups got together 12 years ago. Lake Simcoe, one of our member groups is Georgina Island First Nation, and so I just really wanted to acknowledge them and the amazing work they do to help and steward Lake Simcoe, and also to acknowledge that there are several other peoples that are connected to Lake Simcoe, namely the Williams Treaties communities, and those are Alderville, Beausoleil, Curve Lake, Georgina Island, Hiawatha, Curve Lake, Rama, and Scugog. They're all connected to Lake Simcoe, and thanks for the stewardship and for working together. So we're going to have everybody ask questions in the chat box. You just have to hover your mouse over the bottom of the Zoom screen and you'll see a chat. And so put questions in the chat box down there, please. We're going to do questions and answers at the end of the presentations. And so first of all, I'm going to show a video. This is a video premiere made by Jennifer Van Gennep. This is a real intro to the topic that we're talking about tonight, which is how does development harm Lake Simcoe? The webinar is called Hot Topics because, as it turns out, there are a lot of hot topics right now. I expect that's why some of you have joined us, perhaps for the first time, to learn more about what some of those topics are beyond just Lake Simcoe. So that's what our guests are going to talk about a bit later. So for now, I'm going to show an intro video. Hope you like it.
Lake Simcoe, called Owantarunk or Beautiful Water by the Wyandot or Huron people, holds a special place in the hearts of Southern Ontarians. Its story and fate is the fate of our natural systems, of our ability to plan for resilience, of our ability to put people and the planet ahead of corporate wealth. To build a clean and safe future for all in a highly developed part of Ontario, we need to acknowledge, understand, and address the lake's problems. With a watershed population of nearly 500,000 people, projected to double by 2041, Lake Simcoe is under enormous pressure from development. Do you know how development affects the lake's health? Most people don't, but development is the biggest growing stress for Lake Simcoe. There are four main ways that our current development patterns have a negative impacts on the Lake Simcoe environment. 1, phosphorus loads from soil erosion. 2, locking in transportation patterns that send our greenhouse gas emissions through the roof. 3, reduced natural areas size and or ecological function. And 4, increased hardened surfaces, which add salt to the lake in winter. First of all, let's make sure you understand phosphorus pollution. Phosphorus is naturally occurring and is found in soil and poop of all kinds. It is in dust blown off a field stripped of vegetation for farming or development, or a dusty road or gravel pits. And phosphorus in soil runs off the land when precipitation hits it, and it flows through creeks and streams and eventually to the lake. These are the ways that development and construction add to phosphorus pollution in Lake Simcoe. High levels of phosphorus in the lake cause excessive weed growth and sometimes algae blooms like the one in the fall of 2020 in Cook's Bay. Some bacterial algae blooms produce toxins that are harmful to humans and animal health. When the excess weeds decompose, oxygen is removed from the water, which makes it hard for prized lake trout and whitefish to survive. Lots of work has been done since the 1980s to bring phosphorus loads down, but recently that work has not kept pace with the impacts of new development and climate change. In 2010, the province of Ontario said that approved development would add between 9 and 15 tons per year of phosphorus, depending on how well the developer uses tools enabled in the Lake Simcoe Protection Act and Plan, like low-impact development and advanced stormwater management guidelines to handle more rainfall on site before it flows into streams and the lake. Sediment and erosion control bylaws, which, if enforced, reduce phosphorus loads from construction. And the Lake Simcoe Phosphorus Offset Program for new subdivisions. There is an opportunity to do really progressive environmental development here. It's already happening at Lake Simcoe thanks to the Lake Simcoe Protection Act and our Conservation Authority. Some kinds of development are worse for the environment than others, though. You may have heard of sprawl. Maybe you wonder why it's the target of many environmental campaigns. Did you know that 54% of greenhouse gas emissions come from cars in the Lake Simcoe watershed? The way we are building, and without further measures to reduce vehicle emissions, the watershed's greenhouse gas emissions are projected to increase 57% above the 2016 levels. If we keep building sprawling subdivisions, we lock in a transportation pattern that is literally killing our planet. Things are not good, despite consistent efforts for 40 years, and development is making it worse. Phosphorus loads are increasingly tied to heavy precipitation events, which are increasing due to climate change. Phosphorus loads are going up, as this chart shows. The dotted red line is the 44 tons per year phosphorus load target of the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. The most recent 10-year phosphorus load is double that target. If we're going to save Lake Simcoe, we need all the tools that we have in place to reduce the impacts of development. They must be protected in the provincial review of the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. But we also need to listen to the lake. If its health does not improve, we should not keep on building sprawl in farm fields. We also need strong policy protection for our natural areas so forests and wetlands can do their work, filtering pollutants, reducing flooding impacts, and keeping the Lake Simcoe watershed beautiful and clean. Lake Simcoe needs you to join the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition's campaign to protect our plan. Join us at www.rescuelakesimcoe.org.
Hello, back again. So I hope you enjoyed that. That is a fair bit of the detail on what's happening at Lake Simcoe in terms of development. But what I'm going to do next is going to do a short PowerPoint presentation that goes into a little bit more detail about some of the programs that have been developed at Lake Simcoe to deal with development impacts. And all right, so here I go. And then I'm going to introduce our speakers properly, and then they're going to take over. Okay, so next slide. So I'm going to talk briefly about Lake Simcoe Protection Act and Plan and the review timeline, the phosphorus sources for Lake Simcoe, which we haven't talked about in that video, A bit about the phosphorus reduction strategy, which is really the program that's supposed to bring phosphorus loads down in the lake. And then these two programs, Advanced Stormwater Management Guidelines and Lake Simcoe Phosphorus Offset Program. Next slide. So back in 2008, those of us who could be assembled at Queen's Park did so to celebrate the passage of the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. It was passed with unanimous all-party support at Lake Simcoe. The Lake Simcoe Science Committee had already been created by the province to identify the state of the lake, what was needed to heal the lake, and these are my children, to propose ecologically based targets for what became the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, the main implementation tool of the Lake Simcoe Protection Act. Classic, Zoom times. Okay. The scientific basis was and continues to be very helpful for defending the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. Oh, that's fine, Jen. The plan was developed by a multi-stakeholder committee that did involve the development industry, actually, and First Nations and municipalities and NGOs, government. So we created together the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan with 10-year reviews. So that would bring us to 2019, which was last year. The review has not happened. It's not just you. We've been waiting and waiting. So this will help inform your input into the review when it happens. The last slide showed Lake Simcoe watershed and its sub-watersheds. It's important to think about the lake this way because when we're talking about water quality, of course, it's not just what happens in the lake that matters, it's what flows from this gigantic area into the lake. So the sub-watersheds are delineated by color, and you'll learn a little bit about an offset program where remediation activities are meant to offset something that is destructive within the same sub-watershed. Okay, next slide. So this is the big picture. This is in the phosphorus reduction strategy, lays out this 44 ton per year phosphorus loading goal. You can see the peak in the 1980s. We've come back up to that peak and actually surpassed that. However, one of the things that this slide shows us is that the phosphorus reduction strategies plan, as the dark blue line, is supposed to, well, it doesn't reach the target. So in order to reach that 44 ton a year target, there was a lot of optimism about technology that could help save the lake and the watershed. And I generally am not a technological optimist, but the federal government has just announced $16 million in funding. York Region has contributed $24 million to build a polluted river treatment plant on the Holland River, which is going to reduce the pollution in that river. And they say reduce phosphorus loads by 40%. Sounds like that is still 3 to 4 years off. And let's hope they're right about that, but that would be a really good example of a technological solution that can and save the day. But we're not there, so we're really not out of the woods. The next slide shows the Lake Simcoe phosphorus sources. I just want to spend a second here to show that this largest piece of the pie, watershed streams, is broken down on the right into urban runoff and stormwater. That's 31%. This is a lot of where we're talking about development and also old development. A lot of old subdivisions of Barrie, for example, did not have any stormwater management, and they show up as areas that need to be remediated. Of the watershed streams breakdown, also 25% is rural and agricultural. Some of that would certainly be, well, farming, but some of it would also be new development in rural areas. Natural buffers and wetlands and other best management practices can help move the needle on the rural and agricultural side, but I don't think it's that realistic to expect a lot more reductions from the agricultural sector, and they don't have the kind of profit margin that the development sector can, or the ability to raise prices on their products in the same way that the development sector can in order to recoup some of those costs. So we're at the impacts of growth, the next slide. This just repeats what was said in the video, but the province itself, in their analysis of planned growth to 2031, that the impact was going to be an addition of 9 to 15 tons per year of phosphorus. This is when we're trying to cut our phosphorus loads in half. This is why I'm singling this sector out as a real problem for the lake, because the science says so. So the government here is also saying it has to be offset in some way. So then we come to the next slide, please. There are a number of specific programs that were enabled where in the Lake Simcoe Protection Act. And what happened is, next slide, Jen, the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority picked up the mantle, and they developed some, so we're going to the last one, Advanced Stormwater Management Guidelines. The Conservation Authority in the Lake Simcoe watershed took some opportunities and really ran with them. These are powers that maybe at first they didn't know that they wanted, but once they had them, they were really pleased. So one is Advanced Stormwater Management Guidelines. So at this point, and I think we still have to go back one slide, Jen, we have the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority convened a broad working group to develop these guidelines. They're based on best in science research. They consulted extensively with municipalities, with BUILD, academics, and other scientists. So now, as of 2016, we have stricter rules around how runoff is managed in new developments and in redevelopments. Lake Simcoe municipalities will now be leading the way in reducing the environmental impact of development in our communities. I think this is something we should be very proud of in the Lake Simcoe watershed. There is absolutely no indication that climate change is going to stop having a negative impact on the planet. So we should absolutely be planning for that, and using advanced stormwater guidelines really help that. Some of the benefits that were expressed by the former mayor, Jeff Daw, a former mayor of Aurora, were residents benefit from a higher degree of safety from flooding, and infrastructure is better protected from catastrophic damage. These changes protect not just the environment, but all of the people that are living in the environment and all the things that they pay to live in and that our municipalities pay for as well. It is a 300-page document. I'm not going to explain any more than this, really. You can see the link there to the technical guide. This also includes specific sediment and erosion control requirements. So these are requirements in the watershed. Whether they're upheld through bylaw or not is another question. But again, this is something that we have the power to do because we have that legislative authority because of the Lake Simcoe Protection Act. Okay, so the phosphorus offset program is the next slide. So this is also a new legal power. So it's a required offset to meet urban stormwater phosphorus reduction target required in the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. At first, the Lake Simcoe Phosphorus Offset Program, which again also was developed by the Conservation Authority with input from a lot of stakeholders, a lot of developers as well. The initial phase focuses exclusively on mitigating urban stormwater phosphorus loads from new development and redevelopment. This does not apply to every single house that's built in the watershed. It's for subdivisions. This is achieved by providing resourcing to retrofit existing uncontrolled urban areas. So remember I was saying that in Barrie, there are a lot of old subdivisions that don't have stormwater management. Those are in red on this slide. So as new subdivisions are built, the money generated by the phosphorus offset program, which I will explain in the next slide, is used to build retrofits in parts of the watershed that are contributing a lot of our phosphorus load. So to be honest, at first, environmental defense, where I worked on Campaign Lake Simcoe, when we were getting the Lake Simcoe Protection Act, we were not a fan of the offset, but it's better than nothing, honestly. We wanted to control growth in the Lake Simcoe watershed in response to the lake's health, and we didn't get that. We have an offset program, and so I'm just trying to explain to people what we have. It's better than what anyone else in Ontario has. as far as I know, in terms of being able to generate revenue to pay for retrofits that are needed. So the next slide goes into how the Lake Simcoe phosphorus offset works. So basically, a pre-assessment is done of the site to determine what the phosphorus load off that piece of property is pre-development. The aim is that the developer has to maintain the water balance on the site and also reduce the phosphorus load to zero. So they can do that by using a lot of different innovative techniques, building techniques on the site. So that's low impact development. They do that also through stormwater management best practices. They control a large portion of the phosphorus load through using those best management practices. For the remainder, they pay $35,000 a year per kilogram. I have something wrong there on that slide, sorry. So there is an example there. If you end up with 8.8 kilograms, then that generates $308,000. The Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority looked at what they thought that they were going to be able to generate through this program, and it comes out to $315 million, and that would reduce 10 tons of phosphorus a year, which is really nothing to sneeze at. You know, that's about an eighth of the current load. So I think that this is making the best of a polluting situation, let's say, but it really does also make the development industry move forward in terms of adopting best management practices and doing really green development. And I think that that's something the development community should be really proud of, because you're going to have to use it in other places. Flooding is not going away. The last thing I want to say here is just that the flip side, the next slide, of this is many of us, of course, love nature and want to protect all of its critters and its natural functions and its natural beauty. So this is a picture of what was a forest near where I was living in Innisfil. And this was in environmental protection. And then it wasn't. And now it's a, you guessed it, long-term care home and subdivision. And anyway, this kind of thing happening, land getting taken out of environmental protection was really concerning me. Didn't understand why it was happening all the time. So we did some research. There's a link at the bottom there to our Greenlands work. It's on our website and on Simcoe County Greenbelt's Coalition's website as well. The Lake Simcoe Protection Plan has a target of 40% high quality natural cover in the watershed. We have about 28% high quality natural cover right now. So in order to reach that target, we have to make our natural heritage systems bigger and better connected. But the good news is that we have about 35% total natural cover, not high quality, just total cover. So we have a good amount of natural cover in the watershed. The Lake Simcoe Protection Plan says we have to be staying even or, increasing natural cover. We're actually losing natural cover in wetlands slightly. It's not as bad as it was, or I would say that about the last 10 years, but it's going a bit down. So we are really lucky at the Lake Simcoe and Lake Simcoe watershed to have all the protections of the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. I hope I've helped reveal to you some of the nerdy details of what is in that giant document. If you're not already a member of the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition, please join us under our Take Action section of our website. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to introduce our two speakers, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tim. So if you have questions, you can certainly put them in the chat, which I'll start to pay attention to now that I've stopped speaking. And I look forward to the discussion and to hearing what you other two have to say. Thanks everybody for listening. So Tim Gray, it's my honor to introduce you. Tim Gray is the Executive Director of Environmental Defense. Tim grew up on the shores of Lake Huron and acquired his love of nature there. He has over 25 years of experiencing developing and implementing environmental policy change efforts. These have included major shifts in land conservation, forest practices, and climate change. Starting out his career as a biologist and policy analyst, Tim has spent a lot of time learning skills that move complex environmental issues towards resolution. He has worked with other change makers on the front lines of conflict, and has also taken his skills inside to work on government advisory committees and in complex negotiations with industry. Tim completed his honors BSc at Wilfrid Laurier University and an MSc at the University of Toronto. Thanks so much, Tim, it's great to work with you, and it's really great to have you here tonight. So
thanks, Claire. Thanks for having me, and hi, everybody. Hi to you too, Margaret. Claire and Margaret and I get up to all kinds of bad things within the Ontario Greenbelt Alliance, as well as other things. So we spend a lot of time on Zoom calls. So welcome tonight. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on with conservation authorities in Ontario. Obviously, what happens to the conservation authorities broadly is going to have significant impacts on Lake Simcoe, as well as many other parts of southern, central, and parts of northern Ontario. Next slide, please. So this is a little overview of what I'm just going to try and cover in my next 15 minutes or so tonight. So just a little bit about why do we have conservation authorities? What do they do with regard to nature protection, flood mitigation, and toxic soil dumping? What's the Ontario government up to? Why are we all got our knickers in a knot about what's going on with conservation authorities right now? And then what can you do and what can we all do together? Next slide, please. So why do we have conservation authorities? Well, they were created in 1946, and some of them got started a little bit earlier than that, but the CA's legislation was passed in 1946 to solve some big problems that we had in southern Ontario in particular with flooding. Forest cover loss had led to massive increases in soil erosion, both from wind and water. And conservation authorities were established to try and fix some of these things and stop it from getting worse. Next slide, please. And over time, they also started getting involved in issues related to permitting development and land use planning. So they do some of this work by direct land acquisition. You can think of places like the Ravine Network in Toronto. A lot of folks don't realize that that huge ravine park system that exists in Toronto was created as a result of Hurricane Hazel. There was 80 people that were actually killed by that hurricane because of all the flooding and destruction of property that occurred. And so those areas then became off limits to development. So this happens, sometimes direct land acquisition, less so now because we know more about flooding risk. They also get involved in reviewing and commenting on development plans. So about 92% of the time when they review these development applications from new subdivisions or new factories or new businesses, they actually end up granting the permit, but they might say, well, you should step back from here. You should develop this differently over here. This is what your drainage system should look like. So it's usually a process of negotiation. Very rarely do they actually have to deny a permit, but I'll get to the, why that negotiation power is important, because they actually have the final say. And if you have the final say, it makes you a better negotiator than if you have no say. They have expert staff in biology, hydrology, etc. And interestingly, and quite unique in North America, is they have a watershed mandate. So that means, like Claire was showing in that last map, in the last presentation, the watersheds, the subwatersheds that feed into Lake Simcoe, if the Conservation Authority's boundaries match that watershed, then you can actually plan for the water that flows downstream and goes into water bodies and actually make decisions that are more ecologically based. And I think, as most of you on this tonight will realize, is that most of our boundaries in this province are administrative. They're a town or a municipality or a county, and those are all straight line boundaries that do not line up in any way with anything that's ecologically meaningful. So having an authority that issues permits and makes decisions about overall impacts that's based on ecology is actually really thoughtful and forward thinking, in particular when you think that this was done about 65 years ago. So it's very, very encouraging and something we want to maintain. So next slide, please. So what's going on with CAs? What's government up to? So in early November, they introduced the new budget bill. And hidden deep within that very, very heavy multi-page document was something called Schedule 6. And this is where proposed changes to the Conservation Authorities Act are included. And because it's a budget bill, you wouldn't have heard about it through your normal processes of hearing from community groups or environmental groups like Environmental Defense or others about it being posted on the Environmental Bill of Rights for consultation, because that's not required if it's in a budget bill. Also, interestingly, there's been consultations ongoing about the role of CAs and how they could do their job better for a few years now, including extensive consultations last year. But there's absolutely no evidence that these consultations held with many of us and as well as the development industry are reflected in this bill. In fact, there was no summary of those consultations ever produced by the provincial government. And overall, the changes are going to make CAs toothless and unable to carry out their job. And for our assessment, and we have some good evidence to support this, reflects the desires of what the CAs should be from the perspective of the development industry. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Next slide, please. So this is pretty text heavy. I'm sorry, I couldn't illustrate this with beautiful photographs. There's no way around it. This is actually what's going to happen as the result of the changes. So I'll go through them, and then we can talk about them at the end in question and answer. So structurally, and this is really interesting to me because, of course, I run an organization that has a board of directors. And when my board shows up there, regardless of where they're from, they could be actually working in the development industry, or they could be working as academics in a hospital. They could be business people. But when they show up at our board meeting, their legal responsibility is to think about the best thing for environmental defense as an organization and a charity. And it's very clear that if they're not there to do that and they bring up things that are not related to that, then they shouldn't be there. But what this change is going to do is actually legally require the people who are on the board of the CAs not to think about the best interests and the goals of the Conservation Authority, but only to represent the narrow interests of their municipality. And remember when I talked about those boundaries and how the CA's boundaries are ecological and watershed based? Well, municipalities are not. So they're going to institute a legal requirement that the people who are on the board represent a point of view that is inconsistent with the mandate of the Conservation Authority itself, which I've never seen before in corporate governance. So like completely shocking to me. They remove the conservation authorities from being a commenting agency on municipal planning. Well, why does that matter? Well, right now, the CA can actually comment to your municipal government when a development proposal is going through and have those concerns addressed. They won't be able to do that anymore. They'll have to give their comments to the provincial Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, which can choose to ignore them or act on them at their will. So the CAs disappear from commenting locally. They also lose their ability to appeal developments that they think are going to harm the environment to the local planning appeals tribunal, which is the replacement for the Ontario Municipal Board. It also allows the provincial government to step in and issue a permit to allow development of wetlands, forests, floodplains, etc., if the Conservation Authority won't, or the minister just feels like it. This is a completely new ability to override the power of CAs to say no to developments that are harmful. It also bans CAs from their ability to compel purchase of lands that are unsafe to develop. So, if we go back to the example I used in Toronto, the Conservation Authority paid out all of the owners of those lands that were too unsafe to live on and created that huge park system. As climate change gets worse and as the floodplains change as a result, their ability to do this is going to be really important, and they're now going to be banned from doing this. CAs will be banned from issuing stop work orders to prevent destructive activities that are underway. So if somebody's dumping toxic soil on a source water protection area, or they're doing that in a wetland or somewhere else, CAs will not be able to do anything to stop that immediately. And in conversations that I've had with Conservation Ontario, there's up to 500 places across central Ontario where illegal soil dumping activities are underway, and they're going to lose their ability to do anything immediately about that. It also is going to prevent staff from the CA staff from entering land where they think illegal activity may be occurring. Example, this toxic soil dumping. So they're really being hampered in their ability to do their work overall. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned previously, it's going to make the CAs toothless. They're not going to be able to stop, they're going to be unable to stop the development of wetlands, significant woodlands, or to stop illegal activities while they're underway. We're going to lose science-based review of development impacts. So instead of having biologists and hydrologists, et cetera, we're not going to have them in an ability to say yes or no to problematic developments. Guts the watershed focus mandate of conservation authorities and replaces it with boards that are have members that are legally required to focus only on their own municipal boundaries and interests. Prevents that necessary land acquisition for parks and public protection at a time of climate crisis. And it stops the conservation authority staff from being effective. You know, if you can never say no, why would anyone ever negotiate with you? And I think that's key. I mean, that some of you may have written to your MPPs about this, and you know, they've said, well, don't worry, you know, the conservation authorities, you know, still will be able to comment. But you know, it's the same kind of thing for all of you who have kids. You know, if you could ever never say no to them, and all you were left with is saying, you know, I don't think that's a good idea, the amount of times that they might take you seriously might diminish a significant amount. And that's where those CAs are going to be put into, I think, is having that ability to say no removed, because they're not the final say on permits. Next slide, please. So what can be done? We don't have a lot of time for this. We probably have about 10 days until this bill passes, but the public opposition to this is widespread and growing. And you can really help by adding your voice to this. So writing and calling your MP is key. If you can only have time to do one, I would call. Write a letter to your local newspaper. Get your town or city council to pass a motion against these changes. They're starting to roll in across the province. We saw one come in from Durham. Hamilton, I think tonight had one. London's got one upcoming this coming week. So the municipal pushback is really starting to happen because of what municipalities are going to lose in this. And tell everyone in of your friends and your family what you know about this and how to fight back. This is really key. We have so little left of our natural heritage in Southern Ontario. And we also have increasing risk to ourselves and our families as climate change increases flood risk, and as developers more and more dump toxic soil on our farmlands. So, you know, if you really care about the future of Southern Ontario, this is a really important one to fight. So thanks very much. And I'm going to stop there, and Margaret can talk as well about some of the issues related to another acronym that is haunting us, the MZO. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Tim. It's a lot. There's a lot happening here, and keeping our conservation authorities strong is really, really important. So please do take action. I put a link in the chat. You can just copy that, put that into another spot, or just do it, put it in a new browser now. Please do it. We have to do this now. You guys have to, everyone has to call their MPP. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce Margaret, and Margaret is our closer tonight. She's going to say all the things we didn't say. And Margaret is like my sister activist in the Simcoe area. Margaret's the executive director of the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition. With other similarly minded Simcoe County organizations, Margaret founded this organization in 2015. It has since grown to a membership of 40 organizational members representing thousands across the county. It's a really diverse group as well. The focus of SCGC is to demand stronger protection of our natural spaces, water resources, as well as to promote healthier, low carbon communities. Her work at SCGC to preserve our green spaces and natural heritage was recognized by Ontario Nature by awarding her the Steve Hansel Greenway Award. Margaret also has a dog and 2 boys and a partner named Steve, and she lives in. Over to you, Margaret.
That's my favorite part of my bio is the end, and how terrible is it that the most verbose person has to close it in a very short order. So thank you, Claire. Hope everybody can hear me okay. And I just wanted to put a beautiful picture. This is in Angela Tasserantio, taken by my colleague Adam Ball. I just want to remind everybody of some of the beauty that's around Central Ontario and specifically Simcoe County. Jennifer's going to be running my slides, so we'll go to the next slide there, Jennifer, because I want to get through it all. Thank you. So someone asked about Minister's zoning order. This is my my topic for tonight. I would try not to let your eyes glaze over because it is land use policy, and it's not really the most fun topic, but it's very important. And so this was something that was, sorry, I'm going to turn my volume. It says someone can't hear me. This was something that came about. MZOs have been around for a long time, not really used that much, mostly used in areas where there weren't a lot of local planning controls. And recently the government has changed it. Sorry, my audio's off. Very choppy. Okay. Maybe just go audio. Okay, I'm going to turn off my video. Is that better? Inside
Yes.
panelists?
Yeah, that's much better.
Perfect. Yeah, this is rural living at its finest. So anyways, minister zoning orders have been kind of retooled and given more powers than what they were used before, that they were now become more of a commonplace tool. And really the way to look at it is we talk about derailing the community's future, because normally there'd be a long statutory planning process that is meant to protect public health and public interest. And MZO kind of gets right to the end game, which is what is the zoning or what are the uses that are allowed on a piece of land. And prior to that, normally there would be a whole bunch of studies and community input and discussion and financial impacts and all those sort of things that would go into these decisions. Now the government has made it so that MZOs can be used without all those things. So it really is kind of a bypass. And you can read the bullets about the things that it can do, you know, no appeal process. You know, it's your community, but you won't have a say in it in any kind of legitimate way. And what this is really doing is that it'll show the type of growth that's being promoted, the type of development applications that are getting MZOs, at least within Simcoe County, are very anti-climate, because as Claire had said before, how we grow really does make a difference on our greenhouse gas emissions. And what we're also seeing across Simcoe County and the province is this gold rush mentality. Boy, we better get in soon before, you know, while this opportunity is hot. So a lot of the things that were promised, like these would be shovel ready, these were all projects that were, you know, just at their final stages of completion. That isn't happening. So we're seeing a lot of applications that are brand new that haven't had the technical studies or the proper survey of the community going forward. So that's my top level stuff. I won't get into too much more, but not good news. Next slide, please. So we've been following MZO applications across the county. It's not a very transparent process from the provincial side. You know, we've been watching them at the municipal side because the province had said that municipalities or an MZO would only be considered if municipality approved it or consulted. What we have seen, though, however, outside of Simcoe County is that MZOs have been approved even against municipal wishes. So this is a bit of an issue. 15 MZOs across Simcoe County in some stage of approval, only 2 have been declined. The picture that I showed there is one that was the most recently approved in New Tecumseh and Beaton. That red line is where the settlement boundary is, or sorry, where Beaton Creek is, and also the settlement boundary. As you'll see, they're asking for a huge piece of land, which is in those hash marks, to turn into houses. And this is one of those situations where it's a brand new application outside of where they were expected to go, infringing upon a floodplain, and like I said, 1,000 units that are all housing. So we have some leaders in Simcoe County, if you want to call them that, or Medonte with 5, New Tecumseh with 4, and Innisfil with 3. And the vast majority, 80% of them, involve removing farmland and green space. And more than that, you're getting these ideas of using, the province has shown that they have provincial interest in affordable housing and seniors' homes, which are all laudable goals, don't get me wrong. But how those are actually coming out in the proposals aren't really promising. It's kind of like a label that's been put on, and it's not actually delivering on the ground. So, for example, in this beaten picture here, it's talking about seniors' residences, but it's actually just apartment buildings. And based on the Human Rights Code, you can't say, hey, this is an apartment building, and if you're over 65, or if you're under 65, you can't come here. And the developer said, yeah, well, we can't guarantee it's going to be seniors, but it's going to be just called seniors apartments. But really what it is it's just sprawl in areas that wouldn't be allowed normally. And the studies that would have gone in to get that settlement boundary expanded aren't there either. So the municipality, and New Tecumseh is only one example, are making decisions without really any full understanding of, can they afford it? What are the environmental impacts? What are the agricultural impacts? Is it absolutely necessary? Are we short on housing? And you can see there that Simcoe County, has enough growth to go to 2031, and in fact has an additional 50,000 units to go beyond 2031. So, we're really getting to the race to the bottom, and these minister zoning orders, along with other changes to the growth plan, have only made it worse for the areas that we all love, because they're not well protected, thanks to, Claire with her Greenlands report showing how little of Simcoe County is well protected with policy, roughly 14%, if I remember correctly, Claire. And it's really just encouraging and exacerbating with the race to the bottom, and this will impact the lakes. It'll impact our watersheds, and unfortunately, with the minister's zoning order, there are no studies to counter that. So it's a grave, concerning problem, and we're watching it very closely. Next slide. So I just wanted to emphasize again, I know Tim spoke on it, and I know that Claire spoke on it a little bit, but if you think that we're going to be able to adapt to climate change just by stopping a couple of pipelines, you're wrong. It'll help, but the Federation of Canadian Municipalities said that 50% of Canada's greenhouse gases are directly related to the decisions of municipal councils. That is mostly how we grow, where we build roads and buildings. And as Diane Sachs had said, sprawl is Ontario's oil sands. So we may want to vilify Alberta for the oil sands and everything else, and think that they're the main driver of climate change in Canada. Ontario is somehow immune to that. But the reality is our growth patterns are a problem. They will be the thing that will stymie any kind of climate action we take. So if you're on this because you have an interest in climate change, or you think climate change is really important, but you don't really need to know what to need to do about it, you have to start addressing the elephant in the room, which is how we build our communities. So there's lots of places for us to grow. There's ways for us to grow, as Claire had said earlier, that is ecologically responsible and somewhat sustainable, but that has to stop now. And unfortunately, with these MZOs and these growth plan changes, they have hard baked in decisions for decades to come. This isn't just an MZO that got approved and, in 2 years we can maybe adjust it, maybe we can cancel it. This is decades. I mean, my kids will be out of university when we start realizing the direct impacts of some of these decisions that we're making today. And just for the record, they're 8 and 12. So, that's something to think about. They're not easy to change. It's the Titanic is really hard to steer once it's really close to the iceberg. And I'm telling you, from a very clear-cut point of view, the way that the changes to the growth plan have been made, including these ministerial zoning orders, are careening us right towards the iceberg without any really policy to counter that. We are going to be building more sprawl, more inequitable communities. We're going to have less food land. It sounds really depressing, but at the end of the day, that is what, at the policy level, where people like myself, Tim, and Claire see that this is an urgent thing. This isn't something that can wait another 5 or 10 years or till the next election. It has to be solved now. And I put in there, if you live in Simcoe County or if you don't, we'd appreciate sending a letter to your counselors telling them you should be resisting any Minister of Zoning's order requests. You should be stopping sprawl as a part of your climate action, or part of just as building up communities. And we should be growing the Greenbelt. We should be protecting places that we all know that we love, the places that protect our water, that protect our food, that clean our air. This isn't something that, again, we can wait for another decade or two and then decide that now is the right time. I recognize it's COVID, but whether we like it or not, the biodiversity climate crisis is still ongoing and it requires our attention. So if you do anything, please click on that and send a letter to your local council. Last slide, please. And so just to leave that, and Tim had talked about it as well, is we have to really kind of move beyond what we're against. I mean, at some point we have to set an agenda of what we actually stand for as Ontarians, as community members, as parents, grandparents, as part of civil society. And so just with SCGC, we see the damages that land use planning policies have on our communities. We see that the patchwork of environmental protections we have to protect our wetlands, our conservation authorities, our forests, our river systems. And so what we want to see is more protected green space and farmland. We want to see communities that are healthy and equitable, stronger water protection, including our groundwater systems, which is very important in Simcoe County. That 30% of our population is on private wells, and over 75% of our population gets their water from groundwater. So it's a really important resource and we really don't have the protection for it. And then obviously taking climate action, and in a way where we can say, you know what, I can be proud of what we're going to be leaving to our future generations. And we have to all aspire towards something. So let's not leave it on a sad note. Let's recognize that we all have a piece in this puzzle and move together towards what we actually do want Ontario to become and Canada to become. And we have to fight the battles that are present, for sure, the clear and present danger, but we need to start moving towards the where we want to take it. So I am done, and that was really quick for me, just saying.
I am really impressed, Margaret, with what a great presentation. Thank you very much. And you got through it. It's not 8. Today, it's me that was too long. So thanks very much. And there are some questions in the Q&A. So the first 2 questions I'm going to direct to Tim. So Tim, let's see if you're around or if you're off feeding a cat or something. Oh no, there he is. All right. Okay, so Tim, the first 2 questions are for you. One is just a bit more specifics about who people should be targeting when we are raising our voices about how inappropriate it is to do this to conservation authorities. Go.
I think the key here is that is MPPs. In particular, if your MPP is a government MPP, it's not that we don't want opposition MPPs to hear as well, because then it encourages them to raise this issue in the legislature. But we really have to have the government MPPs be talking in their caucus meeting about, with the finance minister and the treasury minister and the premier, about how people are really, really unhappy about this. If you remember a few years ago, 2 years ago, almost exactly right now, there was a line buried in an omnibus bill, Bill 66, that was going to open the Greenbelt and areas around Lake Simcoe and source water protection areas to development. And the public really rallied around that, and they actually took it out of the bill. The rest of the bill passed, but they took that schedule out. So this can happen again, but the MPPs really need to hear from you. Phone calls, requests for meetings on Zoom is really key. If you've already done that, then I think letters and organizing in your community is the next thing to do.
Thank you very much. Another question here for you, Tim, about Conservation Authorities Act. Can the CAs do a formal complaint with the Ontario Ombudsman? What do you think?
Probably not that I can think of. The bill is being passed as a budget bill. It's an environmental change, but because it's in a budget bill. They don't have to consult the public through the Environmental Bill of Rights. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the answer to that, but I think that it wouldn't lead to much.
Yeah, it being buried in a budget bill is really problematic. It may sound really obvious, and you may think that because all of us who are used to talking to lots of people about these issues have so many connections. Well, actually, we don't know everybody. That's where you come in. Really, you need to spread the word. If you know somebody who's kind of marginally interested, they should be phoning too. They should at least click a button. I mean, so it's not just what can each of us do. This is a situation where, as Tim says, we have a very short time and we have to get a lot of voices out there. They rolled back on Bill 66. This government has changed their mind on ill-conceived ideas before. And so I think we have to believe that we can do it again. There's a huge effort by municipalities and the conservation authorities themselves to do so. Some municipalities are already passing resolutions saying, don't do this, or do this with proper consultation and talk to the right people, which are all totally valid points. So you're not alone in your concern, but if you're concerned, please do something. Okay, so here's a question I'm going to direct to you, Margaret. Maybe you could indicate to me that you are here and available somehow.
She's there. I just saw her unmute.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, this is okay. Talking about growth patterns is hitting the problem on the head. Nonetheless, this means not just where we grow, but whether we are able to continue along the exponential growth path. We should start talking about sustainable growth of the economy and where and how much to build. And I thought you might just enjoy that as a jumping off point, Margaret, because that's your bag.
Yeah, you know, it's the reality is that we don't see the population declining anytime soon. That sustainable growth is really important, and what type of buildings we have, where we put them, water sources, all of that sort of thing is really important. And it moves beyond just GDP, which is something, if you look into the Just Recovery Simcoe, which SCGC and Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition are a part of as well, we talk about that growth has to be looked at in a frame of well-being, right? We can't just use the economy to predict where growth is going to go and how much growth is attainable, because that is a beast that will never be fed. When we look at growth, we have to look at what is actually going to be a net benefit to the community and what's going to be increasing the well-being of people that are here. And I can say very clearly in Simcoe County, most of the ways that we have grown our communities is actually very unhealthy for the people that live here, whether that be through increased air pollution, water contamination, lack of water, whether it be additional beach closures, water ban. It goes on and on as far as the fatalities with cars, the car dependent community, all those sort of things have maybe in some ways improved the economy, but in a lot of ways have decreased the well-being of the residents that are here. And I think it's something we have to confront.
Thank you, Margaret. It's a good answer. Someone is asking, can we paste our 6 bullets on the impact of the budget change so these can be included in letters? I'm going to suggest that, actually, if Tim, do you have something just off the top of your head that you can refer to? Because I would have to check what's on our website.
Yeah, probably going to, let me just paste the blog in that I wrote on the changes from the Conservation Authorities Act. I'll just go do that right now while somebody else asks another question.
That's good. Another question, will this be available online? Yeah, we'll put this on the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition's YouTube site, and Tim and Margaret, you can do that as well. So I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. What's the difference between governmental MPPs and non-governmental MPPs? So good question. Conservatives are in power, and so they're governing, they're the government MPPs. So of course we do have other MPPs, Liberal and NDP. I mean, certainly in the work that all of us do, I think when we're trying to put pressure on the government to help them see our perspective, then we do talk to our contacts in those other parties, because they can all talk at Queen's Park, and they have to make people in government be accountable for what they've done. They have to actually put them on the public record. And it's actually really a valuable exercise. I mean, those are statements that people make that we're able to send back to them to say, look, you actually didn't even understand the impact of the changes that you made. That's what's irresponsible. There was also a question about whether the Minister of Zoning orders are from PCs. No, they were around this government, right? But this government has increased their power and usage. So yeah, there was an MZO, there were 2 MZOs used, for example, in Simcoe County in 2009, I think, or 10, along the 400 to build the employment areas for both Bradford and Innisfil. Those were brought in by MZOs. Those MZOs, however, were full of detail and really outlined a lot around what had to happen at the site level. They were actually fairly responsible. And in the case of Bradford, it meant that those employment areas were built with fairly minimal damage to the ecological features. Of course, the entire farmscape was wiped out for big box. It's employment lands, we need that. But anyway, if you're writing a sitting MP, I think you mean MPP, do you remember copying candidates from other parties? Yes, I would recommend doing that, but you may have different messages for different parties, right? Is there still the Oak Ridges moraine? Has this been negatively changed recently? No, I'll let Tim answer this one as well. The question is, has the Oak Ridges moraine been changed recently or negatively? Basically, no. It's still around. There's still legislation that protects it for the, and I think actually I'll just let you answer this a bit more about the review and the foundation of it.
Yeah, I mean, they tried, this was in Bill 66 2 years ago, they tried to make it so that development could start occurring on the Oak Ridges moraine and the Greenbelt, but that legislation was changed, so that didn't happen. So it's still protected. So it's still off limits to new subdivisions and new factories and new businesses and stuff, which is good. We need to hang on to that. Oh, and just to add to that is that none of the MZOs that I know of have actually been on the Greenbelt or the Oak Ridges moraine so far. Now, that doesn't mean we haven't missed some, but I've looked at a lot of them, and no one has ever pointed out any that actually have gone on to the protected lands on the moraine or the Greenbelt that I'm aware of. And if there are any, then we really need to know about them, because those are ones that'll be easier for us to do something about.
Margaret,
I'll just add in there too. Yeah, I was going to say that there's 2 MZOs that are being proposed to New Tecumseh, and there is a boundary where they show the Oak Ridges moraine, and they have a proposal to expand the settlement boundary into the Oak Ridges moraine landscape. So that hasn't been approved at council yet, but there's 2 of them that are going to be definitely infringing on the Oak Ridges moraine, at least in the New Tecumseh area. All
right, we should look into that one more closely, because that would be, right now it's illegal. We can't do it. So we'll need to figure out how they're proposing to do that.
So this is the whack-a-mole nature of our lives right now. There are just inappropriate developments popping up all over the place. I've been talking to my community in Innisfil saying, look, the provincially significant wetland that actually my family members had identified as a PSW by doing a huge amount of research and work. This PSW is what's buffering us from development, and this natural feature. Well, the changes that both the MZOs and the changes that Tim was describing to the Conservation Authorities Act mean that these features that we think are sacrosanct and safe are not necessarily so. So it's really unsettling, because you kind of don't know what is going to go. It's like we've thrown the law away. It's not very reassuring, is it? There's another comment, and I think we'll make this the last one because it's almost 8:08. That would be a nice time to end, a little bit fashionably late, right? Stylishly late. Is anyone stylish or fashionable anymore? No. So how did Friday Harbor affect Lake Simcoe? That is a question I may not be able to answer in the detail that you might like. But let me tell you, are you talking about the people or the actual lake or the community that was there before? Because they were all affected. There were a number of people who worked with environmental defense and the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition to oppose the style of development that ultimately that was proposed. And the reason for that was that it was basically a massive subdivision plan for a cottage community. Now, if this was happening today, I bet they would get an MZO. They didn't. They got a special resort designation. So this was around the same time that the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan was coming in. Everyone thought, well, great, this is going to stop the Friday Harbor, or what was called Big Bay Point development at that time by Geranium, a different developer who behaved differently than the current owner, I will note. So it didn't stop the Big Bay Point development because the premier had given the developer a special pass by making it a special resort development. And so environmental defense and people from the Innisfil District Association fought the developer in court at the OMB. And there were conditions placed on the development to make sure that it actually did proceed as a resort and not just as a subdivision, which was ultimately what the developer wanted in the first place. Interesting to note that now it is a full-time occupancy place. It is no longer just a resort. So just a bit of full circle on, what did the developer first want? And down the road, governments change, and they often are able to get what they wanted in the first place. These things are very, very long term. One impact I can say for sure on the environment. I mean, there was a marina in that place before, but they did expand it by 30 to 40 acres. Like they blew apart the shoreline to build the largest inland marina in North America. So it was a big site alteration. I know that there were endangered species and threatened species living in there before, and I don't think they're living in the 1,000 slip marina now. I don't know that for sure, but that's my hunch. And they definitely took out some forest as well. So there were definitely impacts, and then the community is completely transformed as well. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you all very much. Oh, sorry, I have to say one more thing. The Orbit MZO. Okay, the Orbit MZO in Innisfil. Lori Wallace has just asked a question about this. I'm very worried about the proposed Orbit development in Innisfil. We must fight the MZO being sought by the developer for this project. Unfortunately, Simcoe County did not listen to me, and they endorsed this yesterday. It's a proposal to put 150,000 people ultimately within a lifetime, within the next 50 years, in what is now a farm field that has a train line running through it, a GO train line. And this would normally go through normal planning channels because it's obviously a pretty massive change for a town of 36,000. So we expect that the province will issue them an MZO. And if you're concerned about it, as I am, then this is something that you should also get in touch with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing about, Steve Clark. And also, especially if you're a Barrie Innisfil area resident, tell Andrea Kanjan. She really needs to hear about this. She is the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of the Environment. And so she's someone to talk to about all your environmental concerns. So I really hope you can all reach out and take some action after this. I hope we've given you some material to work with. Thank you for popping your, I think you put something into the chat here, Tim. In any case, everyone who's registered for this, we can now email. And so what I'll do is I'll follow up to this with some resources in addition to, I'll repeat the ones that I put on the chat, but I'll follow up with some more information for all of you. And all of our websites have some information and some action for you to do, especially for us, our Facebook page. So thank you very much. I'm just going to cap it here. Anybody want to say a final farewell, panelists?
Thanks for having me.
And
Yeah, thanks. I put mine in the chat. Keep up the good fight. Never doubt that, what is it? Thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, because indeed it is the only thing that ever has, is my favorite quote. So something to
true.
take with us.
on that. Thanks everybody, and have a really nice rest of your night.
Good night.
Good night.